Well, the leaders of China and Russia have reaffirmed their unity and commitment to deepening ties as they work to strengthen their anti-Western alliance.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin made the declaration in the Kazakh capital Astana on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, or SCO. President Putin hailing relations as being in the best period in their history, adding their cooperation is not directed against anyone specifically, but in the interests of their people.
The presidency said that he expects to hold more productive talks with Mr. Putin, as well as leaders of other SCO member states during the summit.
And we're joined by Aurel Braun. He's Professor of International Relations at the University of Toronto. Professor Braun, good to see you again. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start by asking you whether or not the three men, actually have common ground when it comes to Central Asia, because they had a virtual meeting earlier in the week, and Putin basically said, look at me, I still have friends. Modi, took the opportunity to take a jab at Pakistan, about terrorism concerns, and Xi Jinping basically criticized the United States.
I think Vladimir Putin wants to demonstrate that he's not isolated. And he has a strong relationship with Xi Jinping of China. They have strong common interests, that is Russia and China, but they are also competitors in Central Asia. Some have said that they are in fact frenemies. And one of the reasons I suspect why Belarus is being brought into the SCO is to strengthen the hand of Russia. China is by far the dominant economic partner when it comes to relations with Russia. Now, in the case of India, India is a democracy. And when you compare that to most of the other states that are members of SCO, India is different. And India, of course, has a very significant dispute with Pakistan. And India is also competing for the leadership of the South. So the Indian interests internationally are not really that congruent with that of Russia and China, and certainly not when it comes to the rather anti-Western policies that are pushed by the SCO.
Mm-hmm. Professor, we know that China and Russia aspire to present the SCO as a counterweight to U.S.-led institutions. Could you just tell us just how strong and cohesive is this bloc compared to, let's say, NATO, the European Union, or the G7 nations?
It is an important question because when this organization was formed, played the central role were Russia and China. They were looking at security interests and they were looking at economic interests. So in a sense, this would have incorporated elements both of NATO and of the EU. But the reality is that though the SCO is, to be generous, more than a discussion club, it is far short of a real alliance. And consequently, it has discussions about key issues, issue statements, but it has no binding mechanism, doesn't have the same kind of structure and apparatus that a defense or collective defense organization has. And certainly it does not have the goals of the EU, which is to create a kind of federated United States of Europe. That is not in the cards for the SCO. And I do not see them even making any substantial progress in that direction.
Okay, so definitely you don't see the SCO evolving into a collective security or economic alliance in the future. Just want to make that clear. I want to also ask you about the competition that you talked about earlier on. We know that Russia is distracted by Ukraine. China, in the meantime, has been trying to extend its influence in Central Asia. More trade, more investment, infrastructure. But this, we know, is a domain traditionally dominated by Russia. So I'm wondering, how is this all playing out for the SCO's Central Asian members in particular?
Well, this is where it becomes interesting in a sense that though we know the famous line going back a few years that was enunciated in a meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, this was a friendship without limits, there clearly are limits to that. And there are these economic rivalries and also over the rivalries over influence in the area. Central Asia was part of the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin believes that Russia should have primacy, if not outright control, over the former space of the Soviet Union. China, of course, wants to expand its economic reach, and with that comes political influence as well. So there's a kind of communications bridge, or bridges of communication, as the Chinese call it, where China, which is a vastly larger economy and far more reserve funds, can offer these countries in Central Asia what Russia cannot, at least economically. Militarily, however, Russia is present, and Russia has a certain geographic advantage, and they are trying to pursue that. But I think they are not able to really match China in so many areas. And this is why I think underneath the surface, despite this kind of appearance of unity, especially unity against the West, because if you look at statements that have been issued so far, they are harshly anti-Western. They are against the collective West. And when you look at the membership, Iran is a member, and Belarus, which is also a dictatorship, is going to become a member. So this is an organization that is attempting to counterpose itself as an alternative to the West. And we know also that BRICS has almost doubled membership. But the reality is that it's very difficult to match the economic might of the so-called collective West, the flexibility, and of course, the structures and the success of NATO. This is the year that NATO will enjoy its 75th anniversary. It is the alliance that has lasted longer than any other in history. SCO is not in that league. It's not really moving in that direction. I find it difficult to see how they could, in fact, become a successful collective defense organization. There are just far too many differences among the members.
Professor, before we let you go, very briefly, you briefly mentioned this year's meeting will also see the addition of Belarus. So we know it's a staunch Russian ally as a permanent member. What impact could this admission have on the group, if at all?
It enlarges the group. It does not exactly burnish the image of the group, which has already been viewed by many in the West as a collection largely of dictatorships. In many ways, Belarus is acting as a proxy for Russia. But I think it also kind of sends the message that Russia wants to have the comfort of a dependable ally, or at least a dependable client in its competition with China, and the kind of influence that it can have within this organization, while at the same time demonstrating or trying to demonstrate that it is not isolated. And this is the other message that Russia has been pushing very, very, very strongly with rather limited success, that despite Western sanctions, despite growing condemnations over its actions in Ukraine, they are able to attract a variety of other countries to various summits. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why India is increasingly uncomfortable with the SCO, that the SCO is becoming more of a messaging center for anti-Western sentiment, and in many ways, anti-democratic sentiment.
That's an interesting take, Professor Braun. We'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. Aurel Braun,